Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Liana Tronci. She is Associate Professor of Glottology and Linguistics at the Foreign Arts University of Siena. Her research areas include verbal morphosyntax of ancient Greek, interrelationships between morphology, lexicon, and syntax in Indo-European languages. Among her recent publication, I mention here the 2023 monograph, Perspectives on Koine Greek, Studies in Morphology, Syntax, and Lexicon. And she's currently leading research projects concerning Latin translations of the Bible, Vetus Latina and Vulgata. On this topic, she will present this afternoon on motion, verbs in motion, insights from biblical translations in Greek and Latin. Thank you.
Thank you, Benedetta, for your kind presentation. Thank you, Paola, for inviting me. And thank you to all of you for being here. So in this presentation, I will focus on specific usages of motion verbs in Biblical Greek, so both the Septuagint and the New Testament, as illustrated in 1 and 2. In 1, you have poreuo anastrefe. In 2, hyupage poleson. The first example is taken from the Septuagint and the second one from the New Testament. In both constructions, there's a sequence of two imperatives. Here you have also the source text for the Septuagint and the Latin translations. So in both constructions in Greek, you have a sequence of two imperatives. The first imperative is a motion verb, namely poreuo mai and hyupago. And both verbs denote the action of going without having any complement of place. So we don't know where the speaker requires the addressee to go. My aim, here you have the construction, so verb 1, verb 2. And the corpus of my research. So for the Septuagint, the Pentateuch and the historical books, and for the Greek New Testament, the Gospels. So here is the summary of my presentation. I start with some words on the relationship between motion verbs and deixis. Then I'll speak about the analysis of the constructions verb 1, verb 2, so number of occurrences, types of constructions, types of verbs, etc. Some words on Greek diachrony and the Semitic influence, and some conclusions. So most ideas I will present today come from previous papers, co-authored papers with my colleague Felicia Logozzo, who is here now. So the good ideas are common, errors and mistakes are only mine. So I start by some words on motion verbs and the relationship on motion verbs and deixis. Here is a passage from the Gospel of John, where Jesus replies to the Pharisees who accused him, saying that his testimony is not true. Jesus replies that his testimony is true because he knows where he came from and where he's going. The two verbs combine with the interrogative adverbs conveying the source, in the first case, pothen, and the goal, the destination of the motion, in the second example. So pothen and pu. The clauses are repeated. So besides the new information conveyed by the complements, motion verbs lexically convey deictic features that serve to fix, to anchor the motion event to the moment of speech or to another deictic center. Here you have two clauses. I've just come from Siena, I will be coming from Siena. Two clauses said, you have to imagine these clauses said in two very different contexts. So I can say now here to you, I've just come from Siena. So we are now here, you and me. So the deictic center in this case is the moment of speaking, the speech situation. In the second example, imagine if I said this clause to Paola Mollo some days ago, I will be coming from Siena. In this case, the deictic anchoring of the clause is not now, is not here, because I was not in Rome, and the anchor is just to the addressee of my clause, Paola Mollo in this case. So this is just to say, here you have some references on the relationship of motion verbs with deixis. This is just to say that the deictic features of motion verbs have to be taken into account, especially when we have to deal with translations. Because the deictic centers of motion verbs can change from one language to another. So, in these examples, for instance, these two examples taken from the Gospel of John, in the first one, we are in a direct speech. So here is Jesus who said, «Hypage phoneson ton andrasou kai elthe entade». Elthe, come here. Here is the place where Jesus is at the moment of speech. In the second example, we are not in a direct speech. We are in a narrative report. So here, when the speaker says Elthan, the deictic center of this Elthan is not the same of Elthe in the first example, because Elthan in this case is anchored to Jesus, is the place where Jesus is. Oi mathetai autu Elthan, where Jesus is, but Jesus is not the addressee. So it's a very different situation. So let me go to the second part. In the second part, I will discuss of the constructions. So the two constructions I show as first examples. And here you have the first two examples I showed, where we have two imperatives, verb 1, verb 2. So this is the type of construction. This pattern, the pattern verb 1, verb 2, exists only with imperatives in the New Testament and with exhortative subjunctives in the Septuagint. But with the exhortative subjunctives is a minor pattern, in fact. And we find this pattern with imperatives only with the verb poreuomai in the Septuagint and with the verb hypago in the New Testament, not with erkomai. Here you have a list of examples from the Septuagint here. So most occurrences are with the second person, poreu, plus another verb. And here you have the examples taken from the Gospels. They are 12 with the verb hypago, so the imperative of hypago, hypage, and another imperative. Given these premises of motion verbs, I will discuss of other types of patterns in which two verbs, the first one a motion verb and another verb, can occur in the Septuagint and the New Testament. Here in 8 to 10, you have 3 different examples with the verb poreuomai, the first two, and erkomai, the last one, in which you have three different patterns, syntactic patterns. So, the first example, poreuthomen, thusomen, is with two exhortative subjunctives in the pattern verb 1, verb 2, without any conjunction. In the second type, you have more or less the same situation, poreuthomen, kai thusomen. So in this type, in this pattern, the two verbs are combined by and, by the conjunction, the coordinator kai in Greek. The last example is a little bit different, of course, but the situation is more or less the same. So here, the Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, "Go sacrifice to your God." So the situation is more or less the same. And here the pattern is very different because we have the motion verb in the participle and the second verb in a finite form. So the hypothesis of my presentation and also of the previous works, co-authored works, is that the three constructions, despite the differences, the formal differences, the syntactic differences, are in fact, denote in fact more or less the same types of event. We cannot translate, we cannot interpret the elthontes in the third example as an adverbial participle because this doesn't give a sense. We cannot translate after having gone they sacrifice. So here you have some external evidence for this hypothesis, and external evidence comes from biblical Hebrew, because in Hebrew, for the three examples, we have more or less the same source text. So we have two verbs juxtaposed without any conjunction and without any other types of syntactic relationship. The three here, so the color, the blue is for Hebrew and the green is for Latin, and you have the three types of patterns. So you can see here that in Hebrew you have the same pattern, so two verbs juxtaposed. In Greek, three different patterns, and in Latin, in the Latin translation, the Latin translations are the Vulgate, not Vetus Latina here. And in Latin, you have the two patterns with the verbs juxtaposed and the verbs combined by and, et in Latin, sorry. So, external evidence from Biblical Hebrew and Latin translations. In Biblical Hebrew, this type of constructions, you know this, have been labeled as verbal and diadesis. Here you have a quotation. And in Latin, what is interesting in Latin translations is that this type of Greek participle, so the type elthontes thusate, are never translated by cum plus subjunctive. They are always translated by the combination of two verbs in the same mood. So either by verb 1, verb 2, or by verb 1 and verb 2. Here you have some numbers in the table. So when in Greek you have participle verb 2, Latin translations, as you can see, are by participle verb 2 or verb 1 and verb 2. We have no example with the translation cum plus subjunctive. So how these verbs are distributed in these constructions? When comparing the four Gospels, especially the synoptic ones, we note that the three constructions, despite their similar function, are not comparable in terms of register. So they were perceived as different from the point of view of register, of the register of language. So more formal or less formal constructions. For the three verbs, let me start by hupago, which is an innovation of the New Testament. It's a very interesting verb, hupago. Hupago is interesting because he has a very long history in Greek language, because hupago had a transitive meaning in previous stages of Greek, in Homeric Greek and also in classical Greek. And it acquired a very different meaning in the New Testament. So in the New Testament, in the Gospels, especially in the Gospels, it's used at the level of discourse. So it's a verb of the direct speech. He displays several features, several deictic features in the New Testament. It is attested only in the present stem, in the first and second person, and mostly in the imperative. Out of 71 total occurrences of hupago in the New Testament, you have 35 instances of imperative. So half out of the total instances, and half are imperatives. This is a very peculiar situation for a verb. Here you have some examples taken from the New Testament where hupage is juxtaposed to the second imperative of the sequence. Here you have one of the only two examples are in the indicative. Here you have an example, hupagei kai polei. And here you can see another interesting phenomenon of these motion verbs, because at the level of discourse, you have the order is given by hupagete. Hupagete aspalisaste os oidate. At the level of story, so when the order, when the speaker reports the accomplishment, the performing of the order, the verb is not hupago, is poreuo mai. This is very interesting because hupago is a verb just on the level of discourse. Is not used or is used in very rare instances when the order is reported at the level of story. So, hyupagete, aspalissaste, poreutentes espalissanto. This is very regular. Thank you. Here you have another example, and here you have some characteristics of the other two verbs. We are not so interesting as hyupago in the New Testament, because erkomai and poreuomai are attested in the New Testament and also in the Septuagint as verb 1 in the different types of patterns. And here you have also some numbers. So I left this for the discussion. And I have no time, so I go to the conclusions. So some remarks about diachrony and Semitic interference. Of course, the three types, the three patterns, so participle V2, V1 and V2, V1, V2, so the three patterns are organized along different they have different positions in a hypothetical scale from the hypotactic Greek type to the paratactic Hebrew type. The type, the pattern with the participle is oriented towards the hypotactic Greek style. Conversely, the types with the two verbs juxtaposed or the two verbs combined by kai, by and, are oriented towards the paratactic Hebrew syntax. So, to conclude, I try to show some characteristics of these three verbs, so erkomai, poreuomai, and hyupago in the Septuagint and the New Testament. They have a different distribution in terms of types of constructions and also in terms of the distribution discourse versus story. So direct speech versus narrative reports. This depends, of course, on the deictic features of these verbs. This innovation in Biblical Greek is due, of course, to the Semitic interference, and just some final words on what happened in later stages of Greek and why the verb hyupago is so interesting, because hyupago is an innovation of the New Testament. It is continued in later stages of Greek, especially it's used in the saying of the Desert Fathers and is used also in the form of pigeno. Pigeno is the continuator of ancient Greek hyupago. It exists also in modern Greek. So an innovation of the New Testament is continued to modern stages of Greek. Sorry for being late. Thank you very much.